Hello and welcome back to ScreenBlue.com. In this lecture, we're going to learn about methods in Java. In our previous lectures, we learned about the looping, we learned about string interpolations, we learned about the case, if and else and if, conditional execution, we learned about string and different data types, right? In this lecture, we're going to learn about the methods. Okay, so what is a method? Methods are collections of statements grouped together to perform an operation. So what that basically means is, let's say you have certain code that you want to execute. So you actually want to group together, right? And you create a method. Okay, so that those lines of code that does some action, right, performs an operation. In that case, you'd actually group them together and put them together in a method. Method here are used to bundle one or more repeatable statements into a single unit. So what that basically means is, let's say you have this lines of code, right, and lines of code that you want to run over and over again, right? In that case, instead of doing repeatedly like 10 times or 20 times, you can actually create a method. It's just have all those lines of code and create a method. And now, whenever you want to actually execute those lines of code, you actually call that method. So you're actually bundling one or more repeatable statements. So the next one here are methods are very similar to functions in any other programming language. So if you're using scripting language, right, Perl or some other scripting language, they're also called as functions. So the next one here, I want to give an example. Let's say you want to do addition of two numbers, right? Addition is an arithmetic operation. So you want to do that, right? So you can add n numbers, right? So you can add integers, you can add double values, which is decimal values, and so on, right? So if you want to do that, so normally till now, without using the method, you can actually do system.out.println. You're going to put two integers in here, 3 plus 2, 5, system.out.println, 4 plus 5, 9, and 12 plus 12, 44, and so on, right? So let's say you want to do that operation, you can do that as well. But, right, that's not going to look pretty because you're going to have n number of lines. Every time you want to add, you're going to do system.out.println. Okay, this doesn't make sense because you're actually printing that output, right? In some cases, you don't want to, let's say you don't want to print the output, you want to save it in your memory, right? Computer memory, right? In that case, you're going to have to create a variable and you're going to do some addition. You're going to create n number of variables, right? Instead of that, what you can do is you can create a method. Okay, so I've got this method here, public static double add int num1 and num2. So here, basically what I'm actually doing is that I'm creating a method here, okay, and it returns this total from these two numbers, num1 and num2. So in this method here, I've got this total double data type, okay, or a variable, which actually does an addition operation for num1, which is this first parameter, and you have num2, which is the second parameter. You add those two numbers, num1 plus num2, right? Then you return, you get the output. As you can see here, this is a method that actually returns the output of the two numbers. So now if you probably wanted to know what this each and every word is, right? We're going to talk about that in detail in our future classes, but if you wanted to know what this is, so public static is actually an access modifier, okay, which we're going to learn in our future classes. And double is actually a return type. So this method actually returns the double value, right? Double data type. So here I've got double equal total. I created a variable, double data type variable, total, and I'm adding two numbers, num1 plus num2, and I'm returning that double value. That's why it has double, okay? And add is actually a method name, right? This method name here is add, okay? So you can name anything you want, okay? So here num1 is my first parameter, okay, which is an integer, and num2 is my another parameter. This is a method. Okay, so now you can use add method for n number of times, okay? If you want to add two integers, you can call this add method for n number of times. So now we're going to learn about what method with the return types void means. So now let's give an example here. So I've got this method here, I've got this main method, and I've got this method here, public static void. Okay, so we're going to talk about this, what this void means here. And my method name here is greet. Okay, it takes one parameter, which is a string parameter, name. So what that basically does, it just prints out hello, whatever the name is. Now I created this method, basically greets the customer or stranger, right? So now I can call this greet method here. First here I call greet, And now put a string variable in here because this greet method requires a string parameter. So I put John in here in double quotes because when you put it in double quotes, that's a string. Okay, so now when I can call greet John. Now let's say I want to greet another stranger or customer, Kevin. So I can just do greet Kevin. Okay, so let's say I want to call greet Stacy, right? Stacy came into my apartment, so I want to say greet Stacy. Same thing, Raj came into my apartment. I can do greet Raj. So when I do that, I'm gonna get hello John, hello Kevin, hello Stacy, hello Raj. So I can call this greet method and greet all the customers or all the strangers into my apartment, right? I don't have to do system.out.println John, system.out.println Kevin, system.out and so on, right? So now with this method, it looks a lot cleaner, right? And all the other programmers then easily understand what you're doing. So that's how you can create a void method, right? As you can see here, this main method also has void, right? Because it does not return anything. It just does the operations, right? This public static void main method actually does the operations that you want, right? It does not return anything, just like that, right? Void means it does not return anything. It just does the operations. Now, next method return type is string. So let's take an example here, greet. Okay, so here I've created the public static. Instead of void, I have a string return type as string. Okay, and I've got the same method named greet. Takes the same string parameter name, and I'm saying it's going to return a string, right? Since this void type is string, it's going to actually return a string. Okay, so here it's going to say hello and whatever the name, and it's going to say welcome to Java class, right? So when you have a return type of string, you're expecting to get a string as an output, right? So it says return, right? Every time you have something other than void, you're gonna have to use this term return, keyword return. Here I'm actually going to do hello, whatever the name, and welcome to Java class. Now if I call this method greet, right? So I have to put system.out.println in order to print an output here, because when I do this, it's actually returning the string and it's actually saving into the memory. Computer, it doesn't print out for you because I do not have system.out.println like in the void method, right? It's just returning the string and it's saving into the computer memory, right? So now if I actually wanted to show you what string I'm getting. So that's why I have system.out.println here, and I'm greeting Danny. So it's going to say, hello Danny, welcome to Java class. And the next line here, I'm greeting John. It says, hello John, welcome to Java class. And it says Stacy, hello Stacy, welcome to Java class. Hello Kevin, welcome to Java class. So you can see here, I'm using the string method over and over again. I use this n number of times and greet n number of customers, n number of strangers, and so on, or n number of students. So now that's how you can actually create a string method, and you're going to create a lot of string methods in your real time as well. Okay, so you need to understand how you can actually create a string method, right? So when you create a string method, you're actually returning a string. Okay, so here if I return integer, it's going to throw an error because you're specifically saying that I want to actually create a string return type method. When I say public static string, you're actually expecting to get a return in string. That's a string method here. So the next one here is a double. So here I've got this double method, okay, public static double. So before we had a string, right? So here it's actually returning a double, right? So I'm actually expecting a double value as a return. And here my method name is add, and I had two parameters, num1 and num2. Okay, so you can use double as well. So normally you use double, but I'm just giving an example. So I've got this integer number1, integer number2. So it adds two integer. And I created a variable double, a total, okay, and equal to num1, right, integer num1 plus num2. So this is actually addition method that adds two numbers. So first number is num1 and there is num2. So now you're returning the double value, which is total. So basically this is the double return type method. Okay, how do I know that? Because it has this public static double in here. So it has this, once you have this return type as double, you're expecting a double value as an output, right? So now I've got this method. So now let's go back to our main class here. So I got this int number1 equal 25. And I got this int number2 equal 245. So I got these two integers here. So now I need to add two numbers. So how do I do that? Well, I can actually create this variable double sum, right? Then I can actually add this number here, add, and number1 is this variable number1 here, and number2 is this number2, right? So you don't have to actually declare this one here. You can just put 25 and 245 in here as well. Okay, so when I actually do that, and if I print this one out, it's going to say sum is whatever the sum, it's going to say 270 because 25 plus 245 is 270. So how did it work then? Well, I created a variable here, number 1. I created another variable, number 2, and I created another variable, double variable called sum, and I'm actually calling this method add, right? And it's returning the addition of two numbers, number 1 plus number 2. So here, number 1 is num1, it's 25, and number 2 is num2, which is 245, two parameters, right? So as soon as I call this add, it goes in here. So your number 1 becomes num1 becomes 25, num2 becomes 245, and it's going to go to this code, lines of code here. So it's going to say total equals 25 plus 245, it's 270, it's going to return 270, right? But it's not going to print it out for you by this line of code here. It's just saving it to your computer memory. Here, I wanted to display what the sum is, so that's why I put system.out.println, and I said sum is, and it's actually printing out the 270.0. The reason why it's printing out .0 is because I'm returning the double value, right? Double value has a decimal value. If I just do, instead of say double, if I do int here, and I say return int value, it's just going to say 270. But since I wanted to return a double, so it's actually returning the double value, which is 270.0. So the next one here is int. So now this int method, let's take an example here. So I got this public static int method here. So you can see here, before we had double, so now I have this int. So I have this find age method here. Okay, so here basically this method, basically based on your date of birth year, right, it's going to actually return the age. Okay, expecting this current year is 2017, right, it's going to give you your age. Okay, so I've got this public static int, right, int return type method here, find age. My parameter here is year, which is also an integer, right? Your date of birth is always going to be an integer value. That's why I have hard-coded this parameter as int. So now I can say int age equal, right? So your age is also an integer value. It's going to be always an integer value. Then I'm going to say 2017, which is my current year, minus whatever the year that you were born, right? Then I'm returning the age, right? And here, as you can see here, since this is an int return type method, I'm also returning an integer value, right? So now if I call this method find age, so you can find age of n number of students, right? So now I'm going to say system.println your age is, like find age, you just use call this method find age and put the date of birth year, right? So if I put 1980, 1990, 92, 84, 89. So if I put 1980, your actually current age, if the current age is 2017, your age is, you are like 37 years old. So if you're born in 1990 and your current year is 2017, you're actually 27 years old. If you're actually born in 1992 and the current year 2017, you're actually 25, and so on, right? So this method actually finds the age of the student, right? So I can do this, call this method n number of times, right? So that's how you can actually create the method that returns an integer, right? So that's how you can actually create a method that returns an integer. So now the next method return type is Boolean, right? So we learned about the Boolean data type as well. So this one here is a Boolean. So now here I'm saying, okay, this one is even method has a parameter number, right? So this number should be an integer value. Right? If you put any other number value than integer value, it's going to throw an error. So your number has to be integer. So now what it does is actually divides by 2, right? So if you if you divide by 2 and your remainder, right, remainder is 0, right? So there's no remainder, then it's the even number, and you return true, right? So if you do division in your basic algebra class, right? If you actually divide by 2 and you do not have any remainder, right, then that means that's the even number, right? That's how you find out if it's even or not. Okay, so if number, whatever the number, and divide by 2, there's no remainder equals 0, right? This one here is remainder or quotient, whatever you want to say. if there's a remainder, if the remainder is 0, then it means it's an even number. Else, you're going to return false. So that's how you can find out if it's even or not. So now if I call this even, so I'm going to say here system.println is number even is even. I'm going to call this method is even, and here I put number 20. Okay, and it says it's number even, true. So if I divide by 20 by 2, you're going to get 10, and there's no remainder, right? That means it's an even number. So now if I do this 25, you're going to get a reminder in there. So it's going to say false. Same thing with 40. It's going to say true and false. So that's how you can actually create a return type method that is a Boolean.